25th, 2026 shooting at the White House Correspondents Dinner. The identified shooter was Tomas Allen. Guess what? Yeah, he was a NASA JPL intern, Caltech graduate, and this places the would-be assassin in the exact same academic professional ecosystem as several of the dead and missing scientists, leading some researchers to suspect this event was orchestrated to create chaos and justify tighter security around aerospace secrets. There's a highly orchestrated pattern of which these deaths are occurring, and Matthew Sullivan's death is just one piece. Sullivan's overdose is not viewed by researchers as an isolated event, but rather as part of a systematic clearing of the board, the tying up of loose ends, or a strategic vacuum, involving the deaths, disappearances, intimidation of experts connected to UAP disclosure, have some rogue actors siphoning off huge amounts of taxpayer dollars into a black budget black hole that we don't even know what it's being spent on. I think that's a crime. And to hide it from the representatives who are elected by the public to oversee these programs, to be the purse strings of these programs, and you're hiding it from those people, yeah, that's a crime. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with David Grush. He was the UAP whistleblower. He was an Air Force intelligence officer. He was a GS-15, and he came forward, testified before Congress about the legacy UFO crash-retrieval program. And he also claimed that we had recovered not only the craft, but the biologics. But he also claimed he was in contact with 40 other whistleblowers that were prepared to come forward. And one of those whistleblowers was named Matthew James Sullivan, known by his call sign as Quake. And he was a 39-year-old decorated U.S. Air Force intelligence officer and a would-be UAP whistleblower. And his military and intelligence career had an extensive background in military and intelligence operations, beginning his career with the 17th Training Wing and 1st Fighters Wing of the 27th Fighter Squadron. He contributed heavily to national intelligence, working with the National Air and Space Intelligence Center, the Air Force Intelligence Agency, and the National Security Agency. He also reportedly carried out work for private corporation and collaborated with a U.S. intelligence agency, and for his service, Sullivan was awarded the Bronze Star. So this was no lightweight, right? In his personal life outside of his military service, Sullivan lived a quiet life in Falls Church, Virginia, with his wife Amanda and her 2 Cavalier King Charles Spaniels, Bailey and Moose. Described as a skilled culinarian, he and his wife regularly hosted close friends for dinners, barbecues, and game nights. UAP whistleblowing and the legacy program. Sullivan was allegedly involved in a covert legacy UAP crash retrieval program that spanned multiple U.S. government agencies. And Representative Eric Burleson stated that Sullivan was read in at the highest classification levels and knew some of our nation's most important secrets. Sullivan reportedly served as one of whistleblower David Grush's 40 first-hand UFO witnesses, provided key evidence to Grush's UAP task force investigation, and Grush was actively helping him to come forward, going through the official whistleblower channel and speaking to Congress, claiming that he had first-hand knowledge of unidentified craft in our government's possession. Sullivan had agreed to testify before Congress, and reports differ on whether his testimony was slated for May or November of 2024. Just weeks before he was scheduled to speak to Congress, Matthew Sullivan died at his home on May 12, 2024, of a very suspicious overdose on a cocktail of drugs that would, frankly, probably knock down a horse. The Northern District Office of the Chief Medical Examiner ultimately ruled his death an accidental drug overdose. The lethal combination consisted of alcohol, Xanax, cyclobenzaprine, a powerful prescription muscle relaxant, and imipramine, a drug used to treat anxiety and childhood bedwetting. And none of those drugs by themselves is really lethal, but when you put them together and add alcohol, they become a very, very volatile mix. But this guy, he was smarter than that. And I just don't believe that a man of this caliber, with his knowledge, background, and just intelligence, he was a very bright gentleman, would um, accidentally off himself with this combination of drugs, which brings a lot of suspicion as to what really happened. And a lot of people don't believe the mainstream narrative. Because his death occurred right before he could expose classified information to lawmakers, it sparked widespread suspicion of foul play. Representative Burleson formally asked the FBI Director Kash Patel to investigate Sullivan's death, and for good reason, citing severe national security implications and concerns for the safety of other whistleblowers, because there seems to be a pattern emerging here, not only with whistleblowers, but with people with the knowledge of the technology that possibly propels or, that these craft use to move in these strange ways and have the ability to travel through space, air, and water with no resistance at speeds that we could never dream of. The FBI did not confirm a specific probe, but suggested it could be part of an ongoing investigation into a larger pattern of missing and deceased U.S. aerospace and nuclear scientists, which, just looking at the big picture, zooming out, and you look at like people like Amy Eskridge and Mark McCandlish and other people who was involved in this subject, this field, that were coming out and actually trying to go public and speak about their findings and their work, meeting a similar fate. So it only just fuels the speculation that this guy's death is part of that bigger picture, and could it be related to Major General William Neal McCaslin? Further fueling speculation about what Sullivan knew, retired Major General David Abba delivered a striking remark at Sullivan's funeral, stating that the young veteran carried the burden that a select few in this nation have of truly understanding what's going on, unquote. So what did he know? What did Matthew Sullivan know? And I think that your guess is probably as good as mine. He knew the secret. There's a highly orchestrated pattern of which these deaths are occurring. And Matthew Sullivan's death is just one piece. Sullivan's overdose is not viewed by researchers as an isolated event, but rather as part of a systematic clearing of the board, the tying up of loose ends, or a strategic vacuum involving the deaths, disappearances, intimidation of experts connected to UAP disclosure and exotic aerospace technology. Here's the larger puzzle surrounding his death: the purge of aerospace scientists and military officials. Since 2022, an alarming cluster of at least 11 to 16, and it's growing every day, highly credentialed experts in nuclear material science, plasma research, and advanced propulsion have vanished or died under highly suspicious circumstances. The FBI is reportedly investigating connections between these cases. Notable figures include Major General William Neal McCaslin, former commander of Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He vanished in February 2026, less than a week after Trump put out directives to release the UFO file. And he left behind his phone, wallet, prescription glasses, and wearable tech. And researchers point to him as a key insider facilitating UAP disclosure. And one of the disinformation points that a lot of the mainstream media is putting out is that he left with his .38 caliber pistol, but nobody saw him with that pistol. Nobody saw him walk out of his house with that pistol. So there's a lot of speculation, a lot of conjecture, and assumptions about that. And I find it interesting that he left his glasses. I wear glasses, and anytime I leave the house, I'm wearing my glasses. And then you got Dr. Amy Eskridge, a 34-year-old anti-gravity scientist in Huntsville, Alabama, who founded the Institute of Exotic Science. She died of a supposed self-inflicted gunshot wound in 2022 after repeatedly warning friends that she was being stalked, her home was being broken into, and she was going to be murdered for her work on free energy. She was shouting from the rooftops, warning everybody, telling everybody exactly how they were going to go about it, that this is what they were going to do, and they did it anyway. And then you got David Wilcock, a prominent UFO researcher who died of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound on April 20th, 2026, just days after a live stream where he expressed deep fear for his life regarding the missing scientist and gratitude for every day he had on this earth, that he was very happy with his life. And that's kind of weird too, But I think with David Wilcock, he was struggling with a lot of issues. But at the same time, looking at it, big picture, his death is very suspicious as well. And then you got Joshua LeBlanc. He's one of the newest ones that have been reported. He was a 29-year-old NASA nuclear engineer who vanished without his phone or wallet. Again, see the pattern? Only to be found days later, burned beyond recognition inside of a Tesla at a Huntsville airport. So you had links to Huntsville, Alabama, Amy Eskridge, Huntsville, Alabama. You're going to see this as a recurrent theme with Huntsville, Alabama. And I guess they had a location on his Tesla, and they knew he was at a parking lot at an airport for hours. And then when they got there, it was burned out. He was burned beyond recognition. Strange. And the casualty list includes MIT plasma director Nuno Loureiro, who was shot to death, Caltech astrophysicist Carl Grillmar, shot on his porch, aerospace engineer Monica Jacinto Reza, who vanished while hiking, and NASA scientists James and Tony Moffett, who were killed in a plane crash. They were flying from South Carolina to, yes, Huntsville, Alabama. And then you got the extreme harassment of living whistleblowers. For those who survive, coming forward invites vicious retaliation. David Grush has testified on an oath about whistleblowers being physically harmed and murdered to protect UAP secrets. Professional sabotage, all kind of tampering with medical records, a lot of just really dark tactics to try to keep people quiet, ridicule, professional, just, totally destroying the person professionally. Dylan Borland, a former Air Force intelligence specialist who testified about seeing a massive triangle craft, reported severe retaliation, including medical malpractice by Veterans Affairs staff, forged employment documents, phishing attacks, and being permanently blacklisted from the intelligence community. Then you got Matthew Brown, who recounted a horrifying home invasion during his whistleblower process, where nothing was stolen but his grandfather's remains were left by the garbage to send a message. Then you got Dr. Gregory Rogers, who was a NASA surgeon who viewed a floating disc on CCTV monitor, has publicly announced that he fears for his life and is not suicidal. And he made a TikTok video saying this. It's gone viral. And he's very spooked. He sees the pattern, he sees what's going on, and he fears that he could be next. And for good reason. And then I want to throw in the wild card here, something new that I haven't really heard too many people notice. But the White House Correspondents Dinner shooting, the violence recently spilled into the public eye with the April 25th, 2026 shooting at the White House Correspondents Dinner. The identified shooter was Tomas Allen. Guess what? Yeah, he was a NASA JPL intern, Caltech graduate, and this places the would-be assassin in the exact same academic and professional ecosystem as several of the dead and missing scientists, leading some researchers to suspect this event was orchestrated to create chaos and justify tighter security around aerospace secrets. Now, I don't know, look, I'm sure it helps. This is a huge distraction from the dead and missing scientists. And I was actually looking at a lot of recent declassified documents concerning MK Ultra, and there's other ones, MK Search, MK Often, a lot of mind control experiments and just really dark stuff that they were doing from the 50s to the 70s. I got into a story about a guy named Frank Olson who was involved with the CIA, who was dosed with a massive amount of acid, LSD, and he fell from like a 16-story window at a hotel in New York. And then they later exhumed his body because his family was putting up such a fuss about it, and found that he was knocked out prior to falling out the window, which is just really suspicious. And it just appears that it was foul play. I didn't really dive deep into that story. Maybe I'll do an episode about that, but it was just something I found interesting. And, and it makes me look back at these other assassins from the past, like Sirhan, who assassinated RFK, and then even Lee Harvey Oswald, who was involved with JFK. And it makes me wonder. And then I got into some of the things about Charles Manson and that he was actually an MK Ultra experiment, because they were doing these things in hospitals, prisons, and the like. And it's just dark. It's a dark history, and it's definitely something that they've experimented with, looked into for years. So that I think they were getting some results, and it makes me look at this new guy, this Thomas Allen, or whatever his name is. I just said it backwards, but was he like some type of Manchurian candidate where he could just be clicked on and radicalized to go do something this crazy? It's something that we have to take into account. But I want to get into the motive. Why would all these scientists and stuff be taken out? Who would have a motive to do that, and what would be the motive? So one of the things that I'm proposing here is it has to do with the global energy monopolies. And this is something that Dr. Stephen Greer has spoken about. And I'm emphasizing that the specific scientists being targeted, they're experts in metamaterials, plasma, and anti-gravity, and are the exact people required to reverse engineer a warp-capable craft, right? And the ultimate theory is that a breakaway civilization, or these deep state gatekeepers, are assassinating these experts to prevent the public release of 0 point or free energy. Because if free energy or 0 point energy would get released, this technology would render the whole global petrodollar, which is what the American dollar is, a petrodollar, and current fossil fuel monopolies entirely obsolete. It would totally restructure the entire economic system of the world. And could these contractors, companies, governments, possibly our own government, fear something like this? And that they're keeping us in the Stone Age with these fossil fuels, because the release of this would upend the whole economic system. Just imagine if you didn't have to pay a light bill, a gas bill, or pay any money at the pump. You had this free energy that you could tap into, that's in the ether, that many physicists have spoken about. And then I want to get into the disclosure wall, right? The timing of these deaths directly correlates with recent legislative and executive pushes for transparency. We've really seen an acceleration of this once Trump ordered Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard to release the UFO file. This is when, General William Neal McCaskill went missing. And, this is kind of when this kind of sped up. Monica Jacinto Reza and Carl Grillmar, and then it made us notice the ones from the past. And a lot of people ain't talking about Mark McCandless, but let's not forget about him. He was, supposedly one of those self-inflicted gunshot wound victims. As Representative Paulina Luna demands high-resolution UAP evidence from the Pentagon, these 46 high-res images and videos, radar data that she claims that they have, and she's actually listed them out in this letter that she sent, and they were supposed to release it by the 14th of April, and here we are, and they're still not out. But the fact that they know that they only have so many days before they're going to have to release this, and at that point, people aren't going to be saying, is this real? They're going to be saying, what the hell is it, and what does it represent? So they're trying to, I think, take out these people prior to the release of all this information, because once we see that this technology exists, I think a lot of people are going to be saying there's no way that this is aliens from Zeta Reticuli. They're going to put two and two together that a lot of these are probably ours, which is another thing that Dr. Stephen Greer has said. And they're going to want to know what the hell is going on. And what better way to keep the technology secret than by taking out the people who can explain how they work. Now, this is just a theory that I have. I want you guys to do your own research. And I think it's important that we all do our own research and we keep looking into this. But the surge in deaths is viewed as a desperate cleanup operation, in my opinion, right? An attempt to physically eliminate anyone who has technical knowledge to explain the UAP physics to Congress and the public before the files are inevitably forced open. And that's what I think it is. They're tying up the loose ends. Anybody, it's like Goodfellas, man. You know, remember when they did the Lufthansa heist with the plane and all that? And they got all that money, and then all the people who was involved started spending all kind of crazy money. And so what they do? They took them all out because those were the loose ends. Those were the people who could tell who was behind the heist. And I hate to put it in that kind of framing, but I view this as a crime as well. Anytime you have some rogue actors siphoning off huge amounts of taxpayer dollars into a black budget black hole that we don't even know what it's being spent on, I think that's a crime. And to hide it from the representatives who are elected by the public to oversee these programs, to be the purse strings of these programs, and you're hiding it from those people, yeah, that's a crime. So I don't know what you guys think. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know. I think this is probably the craziest times that I've ever seen. And I've been alive for damn near half a century. And I'd say that this has got to be the craziest time that I've ever been alive. This is up there with September 11th. I think that when we get to the bottom of this, and I think we are getting close and that we are going to get to the bottom of it, I think that we're going to discover some things that are going to shock some people, going to disturb some people. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think. Hit me up in the comments, please. Like, subscribe, share it to a friend, share it to 2 friends. Watch UAP Troop 33, touching the third rail. See you tomorrow. Peace.